"Sergeant, are you trying to divine the future with that museum piece? We have $1 billion eye in the sky, and you're staring at a glorified earthquake detector. Maybe you should just stick to making the coffee." The crowd of cadets laughed, a nervous, sycophantic sound that echoed in the sterile chill of the command center. They looked from the sneering face of Captain Davies to the impassive subject of his ridicule, Staff Sergeant Eva Rostova. She offered no reaction. Her posture didn't change, her expression remained neutral, her focus utterly unbroken from the small, antiquated screen that glowed with a sickly green light. But when Colonel Madsen, observing from the shadowed corner of the room, saw her stance, the subtle, rooted stillness of a hunter waiting for a sign, he knew this was no ordinary evaluation. This was something else entirely. If you believe that true competence needs no audience, and that professionalism is proven in silence, type "quiet professional" below. The air in the Tactical Operations Center was thick with the scent of ozone from the humming servers and the bitter aroma of burnt coffee. It was a cathedral of modern warfare, with a vaulted ceiling and walls composed of massive, high-definition screens displaying a torrent of information. Satellite imagery, drone feeds, encrypted communications, and biotelemetry from 59 soldiers flickered in a seamless, algorithmically curated ballet of data. This was the final validation exercise for the military's new Odin sensor fusion system, an AI-driven platform designed to make the battlefield transparent, to eliminate uncertainty. And at the heart of this technological temple stood Captain Davies, the system's most fervent evangelist. He was a man sculpted by ambition, his uniform starched to a razor's edge, his voice a polished instrument of authority that tolerated no dissent. He moved with a proprietary swagger, pointing to the flawless data streams with a kind of paternal pride. To him, the technology was perfect, infallible. Human error was the only variable left to eliminate. And in his eyes, Staff Sergeant Rostova was the embodiment of that variable. She sat at a small, forgotten console in the corner, a relic from a bygone era. Her workstation was an island of analog obsolescence in an ocean of digital perfection. Heavy, coiled cables snaked across the floor, connecting her to a seismic sensor system so old it was rumored to have been decommissioned twice. Its display was a simple cathode ray tube, a green phosphorus line oscillating with the deep, rhythmic pulse of the Earth. Rostova herself seemed just as unassuming. Her fatigues were faded from sun and use, not neglect. She was smaller than the cadets, and she held herself with a quiet economy of motion that made her seem to almost disappear against the background hum. She was an observer, a listener, in a room full of talkers. Davies' insult, loud and public, was designed to make an example of her, to highlight the foolishness of clinging to the past in the face of an omniscient future. The cadet's laughter was his validation, but Rostova didn't hear him. Or if she did, the sound was just irrelevant noise, like the buzz of a fly. Her entire world had contracted to that single, wavering green line. Her hands, steady and sure, moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a watchmaker. She made a minute adjustment to a gain knob, her fingers knowing its resistance by heart. Her thumb traced the solid connection of a BNC connector. Her breathing was a slow, measured cadence, a silent rhythm that seemed to sync with the machine before her. She was not operating the sensor. She was in communion with it. The noise of the room, the arrogance of the captain, the weight of 59 lives in the balance. It all faded away, leaving only the silence and the signal. Colonel Madsen watched her, his expression unreadable. He had seen that stillness before, in the deep deserts and forgotten mountains of the world, in operators whose names were spoken only in classified reports. It was the calm of absolute, unshakable competence. And it was the quietest thing in the entire, noisy room. The tension in the command center began to mount, a palpable pressure that settled over the shoulders of the young cadets. The final phase of the exercise was about to commence. On the main screen, a topographical map of the Zarkin Valley was displayed in stunning 4K resolution. A convoy of 11 armored vehicles, representing a company of 59 soldiers, was staged at the valley's entrance. Their mission was simple: transit the valley to a rendezvous point on the other side. The Odin system's job was to guarantee their safe passage. Captain Davies took his place at the central podium, a conductor preparing for his symphony. He used a green laser pointer to trace the convoy's path on the massive screen. As you can see, he began, his voice resonant with self-assurance. The Odin platform has been scanning the Zarkin Valley for 72 hours. We have fused data from 3 geosynchronous satellites, 2 high-altitude RQ, 4 global hawks, and a persistent drone swarm operating at 500 feet. The system's AI has analyzed every square inch of this terrain for thermal, magnetic, and ground-penetrating radar anomalies. He paused for dramatic effect, letting his words sink in. The result is a 100% sterile route. The algorithm confirms it. The tech doesn't lie, people. The target is clear. It's a textbook run. A murmur of appreciation went through the cadets. It was impressive. The screen was a testament to technological dominance, a world with no shadows, no secrets. But in her corner, Staff Sergeant Rostova was not looking at the dazzling display. She was looking into the past. Her sensor, the N/GSQ 187, was a relic of a different kind of war, a war fought in tunnels and jungles, a war of tripwires and hidden pits, a war where the enemy was felt long before he was seen. The machine wasn't designed to see. It was designed to listen to the deep, resonant vibrations of the Earth itself. It translated the planet's subtle groans and tremors into a language of waves and frequencies, a language that most had forgotten how to read. It was a forgotten art, a discipline that required patience and a profound connection to the instrument. The narrator could almost feel the weight of its history, the ghosts of old conflicts embedded in its circuitry. It was a tool built for a world where the enemy was clever, not just loud, where danger hid in the silence between the signals. Rostova's focus was absolute. Her stillness was not passive. It was an act of profound, active listening. Her posture was perfectly aligned, her body a conduit between the cold steel of the console and the warm earth miles away. She was filtering out the noise, the distant rumble of the convoy's engines, the seismic chatter of the nearby base, even the rhythmic thump of her own heart. She was listening for something else. She was listening for a lie. She was listening for the whisper of steel sleeping under sand, the unnatural density of buried explosives, the faint, discordant note that would betray a carefully laid trap. To everyone else in the room, the valley was empty. To Captain Davies, it was a solved equation. But to Sergeant Rostova, the valley was a question, and the earth itself was about to give her the answer. Her calm was the most unsettling thing in the room, a quiet pool of certainty in a sea of confident assumptions. And she just kept listening. The formal command crackled over the speakers, clear and decisive. "Bravo, convoy. Call sign Warthog. You are green to go. Proceed on Vector Alpha. Godspeed." The voice of the exercise controller was crisp, professional, and utterly confident, backed by the billion-dollar certainty of the Odin system. On the main screen, the 11 friendly icons representing the convoy began to move, crawling forward from their staging area toward the mouth of the Zarkin Valley. A collective intake of breath came from the assembled cadets. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of weeks of training and millions of dollars of investment. For Captain Davies, it was a moment of supreme vindication. He stood with his arms crossed, a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips as he watched the flawless execution of his program. The convoy rolled on, the icons moving with a smooth, inexorable progress. Everything was perfect. Everything was sterile. In her corner, Rostova remained a statue of concentration. Her world had shrunk to the single, oscillating green line on her screen. One of her hands rested lightly on the console, fingers splayed as if feeling for a pulse. The other was poised just above the console, hovering near a large, red, circular button protected by a clear plastic, spring-loaded guard. Her eyes, unblinking, were locked on the green waveform. She was watching the valley's heartbeat. As the lead vehicle's icon touched the designated entry point of the valley, the line on her screen shivered. It wasn't a spike. It wasn't a dramatic lurch that would trigger an automated alarm. It was a subtle, unnatural tremor, a brief flicker of discord in the Earth's steady rhythm. It was a sympathetic vibration, a harmonic that had no natural source. To the untrained eye, it was nothing, a momentary glitch, a bit of seismic static. But to Rostova, it was a scream. The narrator could see it in the sudden, sharp stillness of her posture. She saw a pattern, 3 distinct, tiny shivers, spaced with an unnatural, geometric precision. It was the whisper of a daisy chain, the telltale signature of buried pressure plates, linked and waiting. As Davies turned to Colonel Madsen, his smile widening, ready to accept the silent congratulations for a flawless operation, Rostova's hand moved. It did not move with panic or hesitation. It moved with the cold, swift certainty of a striking snake. Her thumb flicked up the plastic guard over the emergency abort button. The sound was a sharp, authoritative click that cut through the low hum of the room. Then, her palm descended, striking the button with a firm, final impact. Instantly, a deafening klaxon alarm blared through the command center. It was a sound that was viscerally wrong, a screech of electronic terror that shattered the room's sterile confidence. Flashing red lights pulsed across the walls, painting the shocked faces of the cadets and instructors in a hellish crimson glow. On the main screen, the convoy icons froze instantly, the lead vehicle stopping just inches from the valley's invisible threshold. The symphony of data had been silenced by a single, decisive, human action. The perfect, sterile valley was now a question mark, painted in emergency red. For a full 3 seconds, the only sound in the Tactical Operations Center was the piercing shriek of the abort alarm. Then, Colonel Madsen made a quiet gesture to his aide, and the alarm was silenced, replaced by a silence that was somehow even louder and more accusatory. Into that void, Captain Davies' voice exploded, a raw eruption of fury and disbelief. "What in the hell do you think you're doing, Sergeant?" he roared, his face contorting with rage. He stormed from the central podium, his polished boots thudding on the raised floor as he advanced on Rostova's station. "You just aborted a $5 million sortie. You just unilaterally failed every single one of these cadets. On what grounds?" He was now standing over her, his shadow falling across her small console. He was using his height, his rank, his volume, everything he had, to reassert his shattered authority. "On a ghost in your machine? A bad feeling in your gut? You have 1,000 eyes on that valley, and you chose to trust a piece of junk that belongs in a scrapyard." The cadets were frozen, trapped in the crossfire between a furious, humiliated captain and a staff sergeant who had just committed an act of unbelievable professional rebellion. They stared, wide-eyed, unsure of where to look. Davies was trying to make this a public execution, to shame her into submission and regain control of the narrative. But he was shouting at a stone wall. Rostova did not flinch. She did not look up at him. She did not acknowledge his presence in any way. Her eyes remained fixed on her screen, her expression as calm and unreadable as it had been all day. She simply removed her hand from the abort button and rested it back on the console, her posture one of patient waiting. It was as if she had completed her part of the equation and was now simply waiting for the rest of the world to finish the calculation. Her silence was more powerful than his rage. It was an immovable object against his unstoppable force. It was a silent, profound accusation that he could not shout down. It unnerved him, and his fury escalated into a sputtering tirade. "There is nothing out there," he yelled, his voice cracking slightly. He gestured wildly at the main screen, which still showed a pristine, empty valley. "I have satellite. I have drone thermal. I have predator feeds running multispectral analysis. The field is clear. My system says it's clear." He was no longer just defending the exercise. He was defending his entire worldview, his unshakable faith in the supremacy of technology. She had not just challenged his order. She had committed blasphemy against his God. He jabbed a trembling finger toward her, his face inches from hers. "You are finished, Sergeant. I will personally see to it that you are stripped of your stripes for this. You are done." Yet, she remained silent, her calm and infuriating, impenetrable shield. She knew what he did not. The earth had spoken to her, and she had listened. Now, all that was left was for the proof to arrive. Just as Davies' tirade reached its peak, a new sound cut through the suffocating tension, the quiet, measured tread of Colonel Madsen's boots. The colonel moved with an unhurried purpose that commanded immediate attention. He did not shout. He did not rush. His presence alone was enough to suck the oxygen from Davies' fury, leaving the captain sputtering into silence. Madsen walked directly past the fuming Davies, dismissing him as completely as if he were a piece of furniture. He came to a stop beside Staff Sergeant Rostova's humble station, the grizzled, high-ranking officer and the quiet, unassuming NCO. He did not look at her, not at first. Instead, he leaned in, his eyes, which had spent 30 years reading men and maps with equal acuity, studying the simple, wavering green line on the phosphorus screen. He saw the faint, lingering echo of the tremor that had triggered her action. After a long moment, he straightened up and looked at her directly. His voice was low, devoid of emotion, but it carried the weight of absolute command. Report, it was not a question. It was not a demand for justification. It was a simple, professional order, a recognition from one expert to another, completely bypassing the established chain of command in the room. Rostova finally looked up, not at Madsen, but into the middle distance, as if reading from an invisible script. Her voice, when it came, was as steady and low as his. It was the first time most of the cadets had heard her speak more than a single word. Microseismic anomaly, sir, she stated, her tone flat and technical. 3 distinct sources, pattern dispersal at the valley entrance, coordinates 0903 by 476. The signature is consistent with buried, pressure plate IEDs, M21 type anti-tank mines, daisy chained to a sympathetic detonator. The new systems are filtered to ignore ground clutter below a certain energy threshold. They're designed to find engines and footsteps. They missed the whisper. She was not offering a theory. She was delivering a diagnosis. She was translating a language that only she and her machine understood. Colonel Madsen listened without interruption, his face an unreadable mask of stone. He absorbed her report, then gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He turned to his aide, his voice dropping even lower, yet carrying to every corner of the silent room. Dispatch an EOD drone to Sergeant Rostova's exact coordinates. Patch the live feed to the main screen. Now, the order was given with an edge of cold steel. A palpable wave of anticipation washed over the room. The cadets, the instructors, and the now silent Captain Davies all turned their gaze to the massive central screen. This was the moment of reckoning. A career would be made or broken, a life's philosophy vindicated or shattered, all depending on what the drone would find in that silent, sterile valley. The quiet sergeant had made her move. The furious captain had made his accusation. Now, the ground itself would deliver the verdict. The main screen flickered to life, showing a drone's eye view of the Zarkin Valley. The remote EOD vehicle, a small, tracked robot, crept cautiously forward, its camera providing a grainy, ground-level perspective of the sand and rock. The silence in the command center was absolute, a vacuum of held breaths. For a full minute, the drone scanned the area Rostova had indicated and found nothing. The sand was undisturbed. A wave of nervous relief seemed to pass over the cadets, and Captain Davies allowed a small, smug smile to touch his lips. He was seconds away from being proven right, from having his authority restored in the most dramatic fashion. He opened his mouth to speak, to deliver the final, crushing blow to Rostova's career. "As I was saying, Colonel," he began, but Madsen cut him off with a single, raised finger, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Switch to magnetic anomaly detection," Madsen ordered into his comms, his voice a low growl. "Full spectrum," the drone operator complied. The image on the screen changed to a false color representation of the ground below. At first, it was a uniform sea of blue and green, indicating normal background radiation. The drone made another slow pass. And then, it happened. 3 distinct, geometric shapes bloomed on the screen in a stark, blood red. They were faint, buried deep, and expertly shielded, but they were undeniably there. 3 massive, circular objects, arranged in a perfect triangular pattern designed to trap the lead vehicle and channel the rest of the convoy into a perfectly orchestrated kill box. The screen flashed with a data overlay, estimating the type and yield. 3M21 anti-tank mines, each packed with 22 pounds of high explosive. The projected blast radius engulfed the entire valley floor. A collective, horrified gasp sucked the air from the room. The cadets stared, their faces pale, the blood draining from them as they comprehended what they were seeing. 59 of their comrades, their friends, would have been driven into an inescapable inferno of shrapnel and fire. They had been saved, not by the billion-dollar AI, but by the quiet woman and her museum piece. The smugness on Davy's face dissolved into a mask of chalky, sickened disbelief. Colonel Madsen turned away from the screen, his face set like granite. He looked at his aide. Major, pull Staff Sergeant Eva Rostova's service record. Read the unclassified summary. Aloud. Now. The major fumbled with his data pad for a second. Then his voice, hesitant at first, began to fill the stunned silence. Rostova, Eva. Staff Sergeant, United States Air Force. Unit, 24th Special Tactics Squadron. Field Designator. Echo Primary Military Occupational Specialty. Special Reconnaissance. Secondary MOS. Advanced Signals Intelligence and Human Intelligence Operations. Combat Deployments. 5 tours. Locations classified. Medals and commendations. Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device for Valor, 3 Purple Hearts. Air Force Commendation Medal. The major paused, taking a breath. Mission classifications. Tier 1 Operator. The title hung in the air, electric and absolute. Tier 1. The best of the best. The silent professionals who operate in the deepest shadows. The name, Echo, suddenly made sense. She wasn't just an operator. She was a ghost, a listener. Madsen turned to face Rostova. He said nothing. Instead, he drew himself to his full height, his back ramrod straight, and executed the sharpest, most formal salute of his long and decorated career. It was a gesture of profound, unequivocal respect. It was an apology. It was a public acknowledgement of her elite status that obliterated the room's previous hierarchy. My apologies for the test, Sergeant, Madsen said, his voice resonating with authority. Your station and your judgment are validated. He then slowly lowered his hand and turned his icy gaze upon the pale, trembling Captain Davies. Captain, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You are an instructor at this school. Your job is to teach these cadets how to survive. I suggest you find Sergeant Rostova after this exercise is terminated and ask her, respectfully, to teach you your next lesson. It will be the most important one you ever learn. Dismissed. The story of what happened in the Tactical Operations Center that day did not just spread, it detonated. It moved like wildfire through the base, from the hushed conversations in the chow hall to the boisterous arguments in the officers' club. It became more than just an event. It became a lesson, a parable for the modern age of warfare. The cadets who had been in the room told the story to their bunkmates, who told it to their friends, and within hours, the legend of the Rostova anomaly was born. The tale was honed with each retelling, the details sharpened into a modern military myth. The arrogant captain who trusted his perfect machines, the 59 soldiers rolling towards certain death, and the quiet, unassuming sergeant with the magic box who could listen to the ground and hear its secrets. The story jumped the base's fences, traveling through encrypted channels and secure forums where operators from every branch of the service traded truths and rumors. The call sign Echo was spoken with a new reverence, a name attached to the ultimate embodiment of the quiet professional. For Captain Davies, the event was not a humiliation, it was a demolition. His arrogance, his faith, his entire professional identity had been shattered by 3 red shapes on a screen. He was not formally disciplined by Colonel Madsen. The public humbling was considered correction enough, but the true change came from within. A week later, several cadets witnessed a scene they would never forget. They saw Captain Davies approach Sergeant Rostova as she sat alone in the base library, reading a thick, technical manual on geology. He didn't approach with anger or resentment. He approached with the cautious deference of a student. He sat down, not speaking for a full minute, then finally looked at her, his face a mixture of shame and genuine curiosity. How? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. How did you know? Rostova looked up from her book, her expression showing no trace of triumph or condescension. She didn't gloat or remind him of his insults. She was a professional, and the mission was now to correct a flaw in the system, and that flaw was him. She began to explain, not just the technology of the seismic sensor, but the philosophy behind it. She spoke of listening to the silence, of looking for the patterns in the noise, of trusting the subtle feeling of wrongness that a human operator develops after thousands of hours of intense focus. She explained that the Odin system was designed to find answers, but her job was to find the right questions. She agreed to help Madsen develop a new training module based on her methods. She had only one condition. Captain Davies had to be her co-instructor and her first student. It was not an act of punishment. It was an act of profound professionalism. It was about fixing the problem, not just winning the argument. The true professional doesn't just prove they are right. They make the entire team better. The new class was officially titled Advanced Anomaly Detection and Operator Intuition, but the cadets quickly gave it a new name. Listening to echoes, the first session was held in a state-of-the-art classroom, and it was packed. Every single cadet from the aborted exercise was there, along with a dozen instructors and even a few senior NCOs who had heard the story and wanted to learn. In the front row, sitting with a datapad and a look of intense concentration, was Captain Davies. He was no longer the slick evangelist of technology. He was a humbled, dedicated student. Sergeant Rostova was not a naturally charismatic teacher. She did not tell jokes or use soaring rhetoric. Her delivery was as quiet and methodical as her work. She was direct, technical, and relentlessly focused. She began by turning off the main smartboard. "Your greatest strength," she said to the silent room, "is not on that screen. It's behind your eyes. Your most advanced sensor is not the satellite. It's the gut feeling that tells you something is wrong. We are not here to learn how to trust the machine. We are here to learn how to trust the machine to help us trust ourselves." She taught them to meditate on raw, unfiltered data streams, to look for what was missing from the picture, not just what was present. She put them through drills where they were blindfolded, forced to rely only on the subtle audio cues and haptic feedback from a simulated sensor. She taught them geology, explaining how different soil and rock types transmit vibrations, and how to tell the difference between a rock slide and a buried footstep. Davies, for his part, became her most ardent student and advocate. He taught the sections on how to integrate these analog skills with the high-tech power of the Odin system, framing it not as a competition between man and machine, but as a necessary partnership. He spoke of his own failure with a raw honesty that earned him a new kind of respect from the cadets. He taught them, from his own bitter experience, that the most dangerous assumption is that you already have all the answers. Meanwhile, Colonel Madsen made sure the lesson was permanently etched into the institution's memory. He personally oversaw the removal of Rostova's old /GSQ 187 seismic sensor from the command center. It wasn't sent to a warehouse or a scrapyard. It was carefully cleaned and mounted inside a gleaming glass case in the main lobby of the Combat Control School's headquarters. The installation ceremony was small and quiet, attended only by Madsen, Rostova, and a humbled Captain Davies. Madsen himself affixed the small, polished brass plaque beneath it. It read simply, "The Rostova sensor. Listen to the silence." It became a touchstone, a sacred object. New arrivals were told the story as they stood before it, a physical reminder that the most important lessons are often the quietest. When a young airman, full of awe, approached Rostova after the ceremony and called her a hero, she just shook her head, a faint, rare smile touching her lips. "The 59 soldiers on that convoy are the heroes," she corrected him gently. "I just did my job. My job is to listen." A year passed. The Tactical Operations Center at the Combat Control School looked subtly, but profoundly, different. The massive, all-encompassing screens of the Odin system still dominated the room, but now, at every single operator station, a smaller, secondary monitor glowed with the green, oscillating lines of raw, unfiltered data feeds. The Rostova Doctrine, as it had come to be known, was now a core component of the curriculum. The principle of human-machine teaming, where the operator's intuition served as the final, indispensable check on the AI's conclusions, was now gospel. The change was not just cosmetic, it was a fundamental shift in philosophy. A new exercise was underway, with a new class of bright-eyed cadets and a new instructor, a young, cocky lieutenant who had a deep-seated faith in the updated Odin 2 platform. He confidently declared a simulated urban block sterile and was about to give the green light for a mock assault. But this time, something different happened. A young airman, a top graduate of Rostova's class, raised his hand, his eyes locked on his secondary screen. "Sir, I have a harmonic anomaly on the raw seismic feed," he said, his voice steady despite the lieutenant's glare. "It's faint, but it has a patterned, rhythmic quality, consistent with a subterranean tunnel. Request we pause to verify with ground-penetrating radar The lieutenant hesitated, annoyance flashing across his face. But then he looked around the room and saw the other cadets nodding, all looking at their own raw feeds. He saw Captain Davies, now a major and the school's chief of training, observing from the back of the room with a knowing look. The culture had changed. The lieutenant sighed, deflated. Hold the assault team. Verify the anomaly. The lesson had been learned, not just memorized, but integrated into the very DNA of the institution. The legacy of Rostova's single, silent action was not just a story. It was a living, breathing improvement in the art of war. Later, in the debriefing, Major Davies revealed that 3 separate, real-world special operations missions in the past year had been altered or aborted based on operators applying Rostova's methods, averting what intelligence later confirmed would have been catastrophic ambushes. Her quiet competence in a simulated exercise had saved real lives, months later and thousands of miles away. And where was Staff Sergeant Rostova? She was gone. Shortly after her censor was enshrined, she had received new orders. There was no farewell ceremony, no parade. One day, her locker was simply empty. She had vanished back into the shadows from which she had emerged, back to her unit, back to the silent, dangerous work that the world would never know about. She had never sought the spotlight, never asked for credit. Her work in the light was done. Her legacy was not a statue in her honor or a building with her name on it. It was better than that. It was a saved convoy. It was a rewritten doctrine. It was a room full of young airmen who now knew how to listen to the silence. It was a lasting, positive change that would echo for a generation. True strength, the kind that alters history and saves lives, rarely announces its arrival with a trumpet blast. It does not swagger or boast. It does not demand attention or seek validation. It is often found in the quiet corners, in the unassuming gesture, in the silent, methodical pursuit of excellence. It is the steady hand that double-checks the calculations when everyone else is celebrating. It is the calm voice that questions the consensus when the stakes are highest. The story of Staff Sergeant Eva Rostova, the operator known only as Echo, has since become a foundational myth for a new generation of warriors. It is a story told not to celebrate an individual, but to champion an ideal, that the most advanced weapon system is a disciplined mind, that the most powerful processor is a well-honed intuition, and that the most important signal is often the one that whispers when all the other machines are shouting their certainties. Her legacy teaches that assumptions are a kill box far more dangerous than any enemy ambush, and that respect is not a function of rank or volume, but a direct result of demonstrated competence. She proved that true authority is not taken, but given, often in the form of a silent, reverent salute from one professional to another. The world is protected by men and women like her. They stand the watch in places we will never see and fight battles we will never know. They are the ones who check the math one last time. They are the ones who feel the subtle change in the wind. They are the ones who trust the silence over the noise, the signal over the chatter. They are the sentinels, the watchers, the quiet professionals whose dedication is the bedrock of our security. They do not ask for thanks, and they do not seek fame. Their reward is in the work itself, in the knowledge that they stood their post, that they listened when no one else would, and that because of them, a convoy of soldiers came home. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.